Hey, Eric.
Oh, hey, Chris.
Would you like to spend hundreds of hours of our lives producing a podcast about Squaresoft's classic Japanese role-playing game, Xenogears, directed by Tetsuya Takahashi?
Yeah, that's a great idea to do in a whim.
Great. Well, before we do that, would you like to hear some hot sounds that I have recorded? Courtesy of our good buddy Mark Shepard.
I would.
Welcome to Retrograde Amnesia, a comprehensive podcast series where we talk about Xenogears from beginning to end. Hey, Eric, thanks for deciding to do this podcast with me. How are you today?
I'm well, Chris. How are you?
Well, my back hurts from hunching over a computer for 1,700 hours to put together this podcast. So, sort of on a whim, you and I decided to record a podcast about this video game.
Yeah, it was a Twitter conversation based on watching Evangelion.
And we're dumb enough to actually do it and spend a few dollars to pull this together.
We're putting in effort, a lot of time, and some money. And we've done podcasts before. They are now a defunct podcast, but we are used to talking to each other about video games, either on microphones or while bagging groceries together at age 16. Right. Chris and I have also been to E3 together twice, covering it as reporters, not as the GameStop schmoes that flood the floor. And we went to E3 back when it mattered, too.
And we almost went to Sonic the Hedgehog's birthday party one time.
Oh, we skipped out on that. That was...
Do you regret that?
Yes.
I regret it, too.
Absolutely. Jim Sterling live tweeted it, and I remember it still.
I think what was it, Sonic's 20th birthday party in Los Angeles at LA Live?
It would have been in 2011, so 25.
Sonic was turning 25, and we had media badges to get into it, and we could have gone in the media entrance, I think.
Yeah.
But we got in the wrong line, I think, and it was a bunch of like 12-year-olds.
Yes.
And trust me, as a father of a couple of 4-year-olds who are getting way too deep into Sonic lore, like, now I really wish I could have told them that I attended Sonic's 25th birthday party. They would
Dad's
not,
war stories.
They would not fucking believe me, but...
I just did some math. It's his 20th birthday party.
Oh, well, congratulations to you, Sonic. This isn't a Sonic the Hedgehog podcast, by the way. I don't know if you could tell that or not.
Not yet.
So, at the time that we're recording this, we've spent roughly 10 to 12 hours recording episodes on this show, and then I think that's produced about 12 episodes.
And you can probably quadruple that for editing and processing and playing with vocals and learning how to do all this stuff.
Yeah, so we've got a nice bank of episodes that we're going to start releasing weekly as soon as they're ready to go. And the format's going to be about, I would say the episodes average between 40 minutes to an hour.
Sure.
And they cover roughly 1 to 3 chapters of the game. This game's chapters are not clearly delineated, but you can, if you're playing along for the first time, you can tell what chapter you're on based on the title of your save file. We're adding music clips when it's relevant to the conversation, and we're also adding dumb clips when we need to expound on our stupid references that we make during our conversations.
Yeah, they're basically easy cutaways, not necessarily non sequiturs, but if we talk about, let's say, I don't know, the Running Man, then you might hear a Running Man sound effect later.
We should talk about the Running Man later, actually.
We are.
Okay, good.
And there's also like relevant gameplay sound effects, voice dialogue, sequences from anime cutscenes. Basically, every music track in the game is going to be layered in the podcast.
Yeah, we're taking the production of this somewhat seriously.
We're trying really hard.
Trying really hard is a better way to put it. You will actually notice in our first few episodes, our microphones are pointing in the incorrect direction.
Yep.
So the quality of audio that you are hearing right now, we did not achieve till, roughly episode 4, 5, 6, somewhere along those lines.
The first couple are totally listenable. They're still better than your average Skype podcast. And it, once you hear it for a second, your brain kind of acclimates to it. But they're subpar quality, and I wouldn't say we're embarrassed about it, but it is definitely something we wish hadn't happened.
It sounds better than it would if we were to record a podcast on a cell phone, on Skype, in a public library.
Right.
So, as we said, we're going to do this weekly. We're going to try to maintain a consistent release schedule until we finish this game. That doesn't mean we might have to take a week or two off for vacations and holidays and whatnot.
But, right, that's why we're trying to bank a whole bunch ahead of time.
Yeah, but you can expect a weekly release schedule for the most part. So, we talked about this a little bit, you and I, but what happens when we're done with Xenogears?
Oh, we're not entirely sure yet. We've kind of fantasized about future games. Ideated? Is that a word?
We have ideated about future games.
Yeah, I'll go with that. We've ideated. Final Fantasy VIII Remastered just come out, so that is hot right now. Chris wants me to play Suikoden really bad. There's all kinds of stuff. The Xenosaga games, Xenoblade Remastered probably comes out when this podcast is wrapping up. We'll see.
And we're going to have a Patreon for people to support us if they like our work. And I don't know if I've run this by you yet, but I was thinking that if we do generate enough supporters, or actually any supporter, will get a vote. We'll come up with a list of the next round of games that we
establish a democracy.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could.
Can you move your drink from the edge? It's making me very nervous.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do drink on this podcast too, by the way. So sorry. So yeah, I think we'll give patrons votes or at least input into what we're going to do.
Yeah, that sounds pretty concrete.
We're also planning on producing some special topic focused episodes about Xenogears in general, not necessarily part of the main playthrough where we go through and discuss the game kind of chapter by chapter, beat by beat. We have a patron that says, hey, will you guys do an episode about Big Joe? Hell yeah, we'll do an episode about Big Joe.
I'll write fan fiction about Big Joe.
We'll do anything about Big Joe. It doesn't matter. So that's what we're doing. That's who we are. Anything else to add before we get to our initial conversation?
No, nothing comes to mind other than I hope you like it.
So after this recording ends, you will hear our episode 0 podcast where we were figuring out how to set up our microphones and figuring out what the hell we're going to talk about.
Not a whole lot of sound effects in that one either. That all starts coming into play in episode 1 and on.
If you would like to check out our Patreon page, please go to www.patreon.com/retroam or follow us on Twitter at retroamnesiapod. DMs are open. And now, please enjoy some additional hot sounds in the form of Retrograde Amnesia, Episode 0. Welcome to Retrograde Amnesia, a comprehensive podcast series where we talk about Xenogears until we can't. I'm Chris. Hey, Eric.
Hello, Chris.
Hey, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too, Chris.
I'm really happy to see you, especially because we've signed ourselves up for something that we probably didn't think we were going to sign ourselves up for, 20 years ago?
You're right. 20 years ago, 1998. Or actually, 21 years ago.
21 years ago.
When this game came out.
We played Xenogears. Wait, let's talk about pronunciation first.
My base instinct is to say Xenogears because I said that for most of my life, but the actual pronunciation is Xenogears. So you'll probably hear a mix of that throughout the show while we confuse our brains trying to go against our instincts.
Okay, so I'm just going to say Xenogears.
Yeah, say what feels natural to you, and I'll say what's proper, and the listeners can decide who they want to believe.
Okay. Vote on our Twitter poll. Who's right, Eric or Chris? Let's establish a baseline here. Xenogears came out in North America in 1998.
In October of 98.
October 20th, 1998. How old were we, Eric? You have a better memory brain than I do.
I was 15. You were 16.
Really?
Yeah.
Gosh. Okay. I was 16. That's right, because I did have a job at the time, and I think you had to be 16 to get a job around here.
Yeah,
in most places. You didn't have to be.
You could be 14 in some places.
The child labor laws here aren't that great, so I probably could have had a job before then. But yeah, I started playing it right about shortly after it came out. I think December 98 is when I first started playing Xenogears, primarily because it was the next thing in the Squaresoft library, the next thing to come out.
Their next game, like after Final Fantasy VII went meteoric.
It was. We were still in a time. I mean, I guess it still happens nowadays, but it was especially pronounced in that time, especially for me, who kind of grew up on Squaresoft RPGs. When they put out a game and then that logo was on the thing, then you got the thing.
Yeah,
or you asked your mom for the thing. Well, one or the other.
And it was the beginning of Square's period where they weren't just known for RPGs. Like, they had the budget and the money to try weird shit, which is how Tobal #1 came over. Later, Einhander, Air Guys, stuff like that was happening at a pretty rapid clip. Like, if you take the 4-year period, like Square's prime on PS1, 96 to 2000, there were probably 20 reasonably good games that came out, and not all of them were RPGs, but many of them were.
Yeah, but every time they came out, they felt like they should be an RPG. Like, if you got your hand... Like, I remember getting my hands on Bushido Blade, and I knew that it wasn't an RPG, but Squaresoft published it, but it had that sort of allure, that treasured feeling, because it had that logo on at the time. For me, at least, because I grew up playing Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy III, as it was originally released, and things of the like.
It was the Nintendo seal of quality for the late 90s.
Yeah. So we've signed ourselves up to do when we say comprehensive, we don't mean we're going to put out 3 or 4 podcasts about this game and then move on to the next game, we are going to essentially go through this game chapter by chapter.
Sure.
And try to record basically one episode a chapter.
That's what we're aiming for. I'm pretty sure there's some chapters that are just entirely cutscenes. It's like a prequel to Xenosaga.
Yeah.
Where they got into that stuff. So we're aiming for 60 episodes. We don't know if that's realistic or even possible. This is episode 0. We're going to more or less talk about the game in a broad overview before we dive into it with the proper episode 1.
So how'd you get here with Xenogears? Yeah, like what was your relationship with it? When did you pick it up? How did you feel about it when you played it, etc.? Spill me your guts.
My guts are going to come out. You said you had played Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy, the Super Nintendo Squaresoft RPGs.
Yep.
In my 16-bit era, my Genesis days, because I was a Genesis kid, I played Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam, the broad stuff that the non-nerd kid played, because I only wanted to get that arcade action, because Genesis was the arcade machine. I went to my friend Brett's house at one point, and he wanted to show me this game called Final Fantasy III. And it had people selecting attacks on menus and hitting people, which I thought was the lamest shit.
Hitting the air. I used to get made fun of for that.
Yeah.
I had kids in the neighborhood that would come over, see me playing Final Fantasy VI, and be like, well, that guy is not actually physically touching that guy. This game is stupid.
Exactly. I didn't understand the abstraction. I was like, I can go play Contra and just shoot these guys all the time. Why would I? Yeah, it's cool. There's an airship, mode 7, whatever. I don't care. But then I accidentally bought Panzer Dragoon Saga at, the only lucky thing that's happened to me in the last 20 years. I bought that because I thought it was the next Panzer Dragoon game. Burning Rangers wasn't there. Fuck it, I'll get this. Played it and liked it. And our buddy Kyle was like, there's other games like this, right? It's like, oh, yeah, cool. Played Final Fantasy VII. And then I played Final Fantasy VII in October of 98. So when Xenogears is coming out, I was going through Final Fantasy VII. That was my entire sophomore before Christmas of high school. And I didn't have a driver's license at this point, but I would go with my mom to Target a lot. And I remember there would be that game in the game case behind the glass that had a giant robot on it, and it said Xenogears. And I would go there and just stare at it and be like, I bet that's another one of these good games. Oh, shit. Because it had giant robots, and as you know, what's cooler than giant robots?
Very little.
Nothing,
yes.
Right? Transformers had been dead. Like, that was my toy when I was a kid.
Yeah.
In mid to late 90s, Beast Wars wasn't really doing it for me. I liked giant fucking robots, not animal robots. So eventually, that drove me to pick up Xenogears as my next game after I 99-houred completed Final Fantasy VII.
The giant robot angle is interesting because, as we talked about before we started recording, I was drawn to this game mainly because of the Squaresoft logo, but I do vividly remember the magazine ad that was in, I think it was in Game Pros and
probably in everything.
Things of that ilk, and it had this vignette that it was Faye standing in front of the Weltall, but they weren't to scale.
So Weltall is his gear.
Yes, Weltall is his gear.
Gears are giant robots.
His giant robot. But it wasn't to scale, so it looked more like a suit of armor.
Yeah.
And then in the top right-hand corner of the image, it said in sort of this sort of cheesy script font, it said "Stand tall and shake the heavens," and then it had a bunch of sizzle quotes about ancient mysteries and giant robots. I've got them written down here. One of them said, "Ancient weapons are being unearthed for use in a brutal war without meaning or end," which I don't know what that means, but that's kind of what this game is about. A young man's troubled memories hold the secret to releasing an unimaginable power.
So that's every JRPG, but
yeah, I mean that's Final Fantasy VII, and we do know Xenogears was ultimately a rejected Final Fantasy or a reworked rejected Final Fantasy VII script. This was pitched as a Final Fantasy game. Maybe it didn't. Maybe during the pitch the giant robots weren't there.
Yeah, they do feel like an accessory to the game.
The third bullet point was one that really got me because this was a time in my life when I was first starting to consume Evangelion, and I was also consuming a lot of Gundam. I believe Gundam Wing was running on Toonami at that time, and also I think I had gotten my hand on some bootleg.
How are you getting Eva in '98? That's pretty advanced.
Eva had already been released on VHS at the time, and ADV Films was starting to release them on
this side of the planet?
On this side of the planet on DVD in the late 90s.
Wow. Suncoast Video with those $40
yeah,
VHSs.
That's exactly what a lot of my income at that, my $5.15 an hour 20 years ago was going through $40 DVDs for 3 to 4 episodes a piece.
Worth it?
It was worth it, yeah. Because I remember that, because I watched Ava as the DVDs were being released stateside, and I remember that wrapping up close to the end of high school or maybe early college.
Your consumption of it.
My consumption of Ava, but I had seen a little bit of Ava at this point in time. Gundam was a big thing for me as well. So this line, stunning anime and giant fighting robots, a futuristic RPG like nothing you've ever seen. All those lines got me. They were marketing specifically to me, I guess.
It was just your interest. It's funny that you'd only consumed a little bit of Eva, because that show takes a pretty drastic turn, kind of like Xenogears eventually does. And now, like, its relationship with robots and its protagonist's mental state.
Yeah, it's a different kind of turn, but it does take it does take a turn. They both deal with giant robots. They both deal with troubled teenagers, Freudian psychology,
philosophical bends.
Yeah, we'll get into that as we go along, because whether or not that any of that stuff is actually effective, we'll probably talk in depth about. But
the postmodern criticism of Xenogears a lot frames it as these people seeing Eva, and Eva apparently took Japan by storm, as I understand it. Not just the children it was aimed at, but a lot of popular culture at that point.
Yeah.
And Xenogears is framed as people playing that and going, well, I can do something like that. But, video games, especially the multimedia age, was this, like, you could do anything in a game with these new 3D 32-bit graphics. So Xenogears, I think, was an attempt to capture that as it was happening, because that would have been, I guess, developed around 90s. When was Eva, 95?
A little bit after that.
Yeah, so that's in its moment where people are thinking about it.
There's some, I guess you can make an argument whether or not that the influence was direct, or it was just more of an amalgamation of things that were popular in Japan along the way. The director of this game, writer and director, Tetsuya Takahashi. Takahashi is uniquely dedicated to his shit, and we know this. I mean, there's a lot to be read about that. Jeremy Parrish wrote a great article on Polygon about how he has taken the story that he's wanted to be told across two different publishers, three different publishers, two different development studios, and three different essentially series. This game, Xenogears, Xenosaga, and now the Xenoblade games that are coming out now. So he's extremely dedicated to telling his shit. Just simply, you can perceive that just simply based on the fact that he has continued to try to tell the story.
Right. And all three series have common elements despite not being directly related to each other. And not just like Easter eggs, too, but you can tell they take philosophical dives. They all get existentially weird at some point. Even Xenoblade, both of those, like, if you pull out far enough, they're kind of saying the same things in different and more sophisticated ways as time goes on.
The sophistication of the story and what it draws from, I think, is going to be one of the more interesting things that we're going to talk about now. Yeah. Because when was the last time you played this game?
I played it first in the spring of 99 and most recently spring of 2005.
To completion?
To completion.
Wow. Okay, so I've just played it the one time.
Yeah, we're recording this episode before we've properly started replaying it.
Yes, we have not started replaying the game when we're recording this. That's a good point to make. And I've not played through again myself. I have seen bits and pieces of it from watching friends play. I've started a couple playthroughs here and there, but I've never actually gone back through the game. So the way I think one of the more interesting things that we're gonna come across here is, for as deep and complex that this game felt to us at age 15 and 16, is that how are we going to rate the sort of up its own acidness of this game this time around?
We'd like to explore if it was actually deep, or if it's all surface level stuff that's dressed up in mountains of dialogue and text. Or if it actually, if we can still connect to it, or if from an older point of view, if we can see through it to what it actually is, or see what it's trying to do in a better way.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how I'm going to react to it, because there's so many things about the game. About how convoluted the game became. Because if you haven't played the game, then you don't know about the walls of text.
It's very wordy.
The sort of contrasting style from what we were used to with Final Fantasy VII, because we're working. Xenogears works with 2D sprites on 3D rotatable backgrounds.
Yes, polygonal backgrounds. Nowadays,
it's almost a necessary skill nowadays to be able to use the right thumbstick to sort of to control your camera in any game.
But it was still L1, R1 at this point.
It was L1, R1 at this point, and that is going to feel weird to play through again. And sprites age well. But do sprites on 3D backgrounds that aren't super high res?
That's what we're going to find out. Like, I think it ages well compared to its peers, but like this was still kind of like a wild new frontier for RPGs. Like Suikoden was like small Super NES sprites against was it polygonal backgrounds?
No, it was all 2D.
It was all 2D. Yeah. Final Fantasy VII was 3D crude sprites on pre-rendered backgrounds. Grandia and Xenogears, which came out around the same time, was sprites on polygonal backgrounds. Yeah. Which was weird, but like it dropped off on detail, but I think it provided more of a 3D sense of space in your head when you play it. Yeah. Like Final Fantasy VII always felt kind of storybookish based on how I don't know, uninteractive.
Yeah.
Ininteractive. I'm not sure what that word is. Non-interactive. It was.
Yes, non-interactive. There you go.
Whereas, I think, was Xenogears a game where you could, like, run into, like, a kitchen and knock shit off or, like, rattle it or anything? Or am I assigning that to some other memory? I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out.
Either way, it's got a visual style that really hasn't been done. It's like PS2 gave that up for full polygons. Like, it was kind of the last hurrah for sprites before the indie scene took it back in the mid to late 2000s.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it's fully rotatable 3D is...
Is it quarter rotatable, or if you touch it, it rotates a little bit? Do you remember?
I think it feels sort of analog. I played around with the game for about 5 minutes, just making sure that it was working on modern hardware. There's a certain look to sort of an isometric game. I'm trying to think of a good example, like the perspective of like Final Fantasy Tactics. I know those are all 2D background. That's all 2D stuff.
Yeah, but it's not directly overhead. It's not from the side. It's at an angle.
And Xenogears sort of has an isometric look, and I think it would have aged better if it would have been locked in to that.
Yeah, you have to get detail on fully, like you have to have an isometric look, otherwise characters can't walk properly without being a top-down view and it not looking weird as hell.
So it'll be neat to see how much we complain about that and how much it washes over us.
I've gone back to a lot of PlayStation 1 games recently, and like I didn't pay attention to texture warping when I was younger, but now I see it all the time about how the PlayStation couldn't handle that shit, and if you look at the edges, it bends all the polygons.
Yeah.
So I play a lot of retro games, and I find that once you're in it for an hour, you start to like not care about the modern amenities that games afford you, like auto saving and how everything just works and looks nice. Your brain kind of acclimates to the experience, and you start to you kind of time travel with your brain basically. And doing that with the adult brain that is prepared to like criticize it and better appreciate what it was trying to do should be an interesting kind of way to look at it and talk about for 60 episodes.
Let's help me set some ground rules for myself here. So I was trying to decide on whether or not I wanted. Well, first let's establish, if you want to play this game now, you have to either have the disc and play it.
2 discs.
Yes, 2 disc. That'll be a thing later. You have to have the game and play it on a PlayStation 1, a backwards compatible PlayStation 3,
or PS2.
Or I forgot those were backwards compatible as well. You can download the game from the PSN store on a PS3 or a Vita, correct?
Or a PSP.
Or PSP. Oh, you can?
Yeah, it is playable on PSP. And it's a convoluted way, but you can actually, if you have that PS2 memory card adapter, there's a way you can move saves from PS1 to PSP to PS3. Like, it's a pain in the ass, but you can realize Kojima's dream of transferring through some convoluted ass methods.
I do have a PSP up there that works, I think. So maybe I'll consider that.
Yeah, it's $10 if you download it.
My current plan is to play the original discs on the PlayStation 3. But am I allowed to use the motion or the texture smoothing feature for the purposes of this podcast?
It really helps for this game because if you texture smooth those sprites, they come out way clear. And especially if your TV's scaling it weird, which it sounds like most modern LCD units might. Like, the smoothing would actually help digest it. There's also faster loading, I believe, at least on PS2 as well.
Okay.
I'm going to play it on a CRT through a PS1.
You're gonna get the full experience.
Yeah, dude, I'm going to get the full experience with my giant stereo speakers.
The only way to get the real full experience of playing this game is like to play for 16 hours straight and have your mom bring you some spaghetti because she's afraid you're going to die because you're playing it for so long.
When you're like, you were the age when your like parents had started to lose control of you a little bit, and you're like you had you found out telling them no worked.
Yeah. It's like it's 5 a.m. Why are you still playing this game? Like, Dad, I didn't get off work till 11, so please,
it's fine.
It's fine. Just let me play. This is what I'm doing for Christmas break.
Yeah, I have to go back to work in an hour. Let me go.
And if I don't play this game before school is back, then I'm not going to do well in school. So
this was a game you mentioned. I don't mean to keep going back to that time, but this was a time. I was still in like one game every couple of months mode. Like, this was my game for 5 months.
I think the time period that you and I digested the game is probably going to be a rearccurring thing to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to come back to a lot of this
stuff. If this podcast turns into me and you just reminiscing about how much we hated ourselves when we were 16, then please write us and tell us to fuck off.
But it's also like, I didn't have anyone to share this shit with.
Yeah,
I had no contemporaries to play this with, and it'll be nice to have someone to play it with where we can like hopefully not necessarily geek out, because we want to approach this kind of from a mature point of view and talk about this game ostensibly made for children in our
I think there's still room to geek out or fanboy out about certain elements.
Right.
There's going to be certain things that happen that are going to really kind of strike those same chords that they did, all those years ago. this game is full of really great set piece moments, which I'm sure we'll get to. But there's some that we still think about today.
Like when the phrasing of "don't give in to astonishment," I can remember how I felt like when I was a kid witnessing it versus an adult, and hopefully try to articulate that on the podcast.
I guess I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, but I still to this day I can fall victim to astonishment quite easily, especially when it comes in the space of video games and anime and things that I grew up liking. It's very easy for me just to kind of sit back, jaw agape and just enjoy what's on there. And I think that's a good thing. But at the same time, this is a game worth sort of dissecting.
I think there's a good quote about Metal Gear where your favorite one is whatever one you're playing right now. Maybe. I think that was about Metal Gear. I think you may have said that at some point, or somebody. I don't know.
I don't know who said that, but
just to finish, where to get the game, you can also steal this game from the internet and play it with the EPSXE emulator on, let's say, any computer with a graphics card from 2007 up.
Yeah.
You can also buy the PlayStation Classic for $25 to $60 and hack that shit.
I considered that route as well.
Yeah.
But I just didn't want to spend the money when I already have a copy of the disc. By the way, why did you give me a copy of the disc? Because you have two?
Yeah, Chris and I were doing prep work on this to figure out how we're going to do this, and I set some props out, which were 2 copies of Xenogears, which is not like the most expensive Square game, but it's like $50 now, it's up there. Halfway through playing this game, my copy vanished. Like, I didn't fucking have it anymore. And we never figured out really what happened, but I wanted to keep playing it, so I gathered, I was saving to buy a laptop at the time, so I took my laptop savings money, never bought the laptop, and bought another copy. And a year later, we found it in my brother's toy box. So he would have been 9 at the time. He didn't have a play. I don't know what the hell.
Was he just fucking with you?
I think so. Okay. I'm pretty sure it was a revenge operation. You didn't grow up with a brother. You had a sister. Yeah. I'm still there was some weird sibling shit there, but there was definitely some bastardry, sabotage, immature shit on both sides happening.
Interesting.
That's why I have 2 copies of the game.
Well, you know what? It worked out for...
it worked out for a podcast 20 years later.
Yeah. Hey,
cool.
It worked out. I mean, at least it saved me $10, right?
Yeah. Or maybe, unless you buy it again.
The one thing that we talked about the motion smoothing earlier, and I briefly considered doing this on an emulator or doing this on the PlayStation Classic just because I wanted to layer in some artificial CRT scan lines. Mm-hmm. But I think... Huh?
You can go either way. I like that stuff. I love seeing scan lines now.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm playing it on an old CRT that looks like that.
Yeah. I enjoy that now when I'm playing with, PlayStation a Super NES Classic or anything of that nature. I enjoy the scan line stuff.
If you don't know what scan lines are, you're better off. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, if you can just ignore that.
The less you know, the better off you are.
Yeah. It's like if you leave the motion smoothing on your new TV and it doesn't make you vomit, then God. Good for you.
Yeah. Bless you, whatever.
Yeah, great for you.
Oh.
So where do we go from here? I mean, we've got a lot to talk about in this once we start playing the game, but do we want to talk about any sort of contemporaries, what else are we going to need to talk about during the course of dissecting this game? Because this game has obviously this is true with any video game, but there are a lot of hands on the video game, and a lot of the hands that worked on this video game are people that are responsible for making some of the games that you and I both hold in high regard.
Sure.
Takahashi, this was the first game he directed, like we said earlier, but he previously did artwork for Final Fantasy 4, 5, 6, Chrono Trigger, and Secret of Mana. All those games are very high on a pedestal for me. Those are games I grew up playing.
Very evocative 16-bit art. Like the Secret of Mana, it's probably not, he didn't make this, but that cover box for Secret of Mana is one of my favorite covers of all time.
I think he did map art on that game, or map design on that game, but I could be wrong. But there's, even though Secret of Mana is the opposite of a convoluted, complicated, epic story, there are a few sort of set piece moments that I think that we can draw some parallels to.
Yeah, you can see shades of the evolution.
Whether or not they're intentional or not, it doesn't matter. It's like some of those influences may be coincidental or may be a direct influence.
It's funny in a postscript seeing how many active references there were in Xenogears. Like Luca from Chrono Trigger's in it. There's a picture of Tifa on a wall in Solaris at some point. But with as far as his fingerprints elsewhere, how deep into Xenosaga did you get?
I played all of the first one and most of the second one.
The second one killed it for a lot of people. The battle system was really slow.
It was slow, and I liked it a little bit, but I think I bounced off of it a little bit because I got too far in the game and maybe needed to grind or something that it's not important for this conversation.
He remade it on DS with Xenosaga 1 and 2. Monolith Soft actually made that, and it never got translated or localized. So no one really ever played it.
Wow.
And I don't think Somabringer came out on this side of the planet. So, as far as games he's been directly involved in, I think it's just been Xeno since then. I think Monolith made a Wii horror game. I don't remember. I can't speak to that.
There's, in just a sort of 5 or 6 minutes, I played it to make sure, 5 or 6 minutes is a relative term. The 5 or 6 minutes, I actually was controlling my character after the game actually kicks off. I spent some time just running around talking to people in the first village, and one of the things that I first noticed was that it has a similar dialogue system to Chrono Trigger, where you can
what do you mean by that?
Initiate the conversation with the NPC, and then after, I think in this game, after a certain point, you can start free running around the city as the dialogue finishes.
Oh, okay, cool.
And if you run too far, it kills the dialogue scene. Chrono Trigger is the only JRPG I can think back to that actually did that. So there's just like a lot of little things that evoke Chrono Trigger, most notably the soundtrack, but...
Yeah, I want to talk about Mitsuda, but when you talked about running around, you summoned a memory for me of doing some Half-Life 2 shit where somebody's talking and I jump on somebody else's head and ride them around.
Yeah. It's sort of, it's not as bad as Half-Life 2 or a first-person game where you can really kind of break what's going on.
Yeah, be a fucking
narratively.
Idiot.
I always thought it was a nice little convenience thing because most of the dialogue when you're running around a town in these games is mostly incidental.
Yeah. I'm gonna like, usually these days I skip NPC dialogue, but since we're doing this project, I want to see what every motherfucker here has to say. And I'm gonna say that now. Probably I'll decommit from that once we get at least to Nissan or something like that.
Yeah.
But like now since like I have an excuse to like not go through a game as fast as I can, but to sit and stop and smell the roses.
Yeah.
You also wanted to talk about Mitsuda, and I think that his music, his soundtrack, what's his first name? Do we have that written down?
His name is Yasunori
Mitsuda.
Most famous for the Chrono Trigger soundtrack, correct?
He helped in that. He played a part in that.
Okay. Chrono Cross soundtrack.
Chrono Cross soundtrack.
Well, yeah. His
first soundtrack, according to his Wikipedia entry, was Radical Dreamers, the Satellaview Chrono Trigger-ish game, adjacent, let's say. But I listen to this still fairly regularly, and I think it still really holds up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As far as like not sounding like, if you look at this game, you're like, oh, it's fucking PS1. If you listen to this game, you can pick it out from any era, I guess. So I'm looking forward to hearing all of those tunes in their proper context again.
Yeah, it's terrific. The very first town theme a lot of evocations of the Millennial Fair music from
Chrono Trigger. Right, very pastoral.
Yeah. So, I think that'll be something that we can talk about along the way is how the soundtrack layers into this game and what it evokes from previous games, because it's a big part of it. And I think it'll be even a bigger part of it in our, adult playthrough of this game, because there's going to be a lot of cutscene and set piece moments in this game that just, I don't think that are going to land in quite the way they did in 1998, because in 1998, this was the height of video game technology. Yeah. And now we're sitting here on August 10th, 2019, and seeing 32-bit or polygonal, low poly giant robots fighting against, celestial religious symbols and whatnot.
I'm assuming I'm going to see the cutscenes as crudely animated, like almost like action figures being manipulated a little bit. But one thing we kind of alluded to but didn't reference is, unlike Final Fantasy VII, which made its commercial and made its bones on computer-generated animation, this had anime.
Yes, and that was a big piece of the marketing that drew me in. I'm trying to think, I know you're really good with dates. Can you pinpoint Lunar Silver Star Story Complete?
Complete was 98.
98. earlier 98 than this.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, 99, because I played it with Ridge Racer Type 4. It came out in May or April of 99. Okay. But the Sega CD version was like 92.
Yeah, I didn't play it until it hit PlayStation.
Right, so but it still had anime in the Sega CD version.
Yes. But I'm just thinking personally.
As far as like anime.
This was probably the first. This had to be the first Japanese RPG that I played that had anime cutscenes.
Like, it was during the anime boom. Like, we were getting some stuff on Nickelodeon that was weirdly, not quite anime, but like Japan animation that was coming over and being redubbed and stuff like that.
Toonami was a thing at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say, this was like when that shit was getting popular and people our age, the teens of our era, were finding out that anime was like some serious shit that only cool kids knew about.
Yeah.
Or big dorks. Whatever.
Yeah, this was more of the big dork anime era where you didn't really talk about it.
We didn't talk, but Metal Gear is anime. People that played football talked to me about Metal Gear, right?
Yeah, but
it's anime in theme, not literally anime. But this was literally anime.
There weren't people that were into anime that were at the quote unquote cool kids table at this time.
Not in my school, which is also Chris's school.
Yeah, and you know what? Our scholastic background, I think, plays a part in, if at least for me, it plays a part in how I saw this game because. Okay, Eric and I, you went to Catholic schools for 12 years too.
Right.
And we're both playing this game as we're sort of coming of age, 15, 16 years old. And at about the, I was about to say about the fuck the police moment, but it's more the...
Well, you challenge God.
You challenge the institutional religion. Mm-hmm. Naturally, I think at that age.
Part of rebellion.
Especially if you are brought up in that environment. And... Xenogears is about that a lot.
There's a lot of iconography that it just employs. Sometimes it uses for good. Sometimes it just references.
There's a literal church. Yeah.
I mean, there's a church that does bad shit, kind of like the church at that point that we didn't quite know about.
It's not great. I mean, it's great, but it's not great. It's good. Yeah, no. There's a lot of very easy and simple parallels to be drawn at the time. And
so it was at about a time when, like, I think I saw this and played this around the same time I saw Dogma.
Oh, wow.
Which was the first time someone, like, put the idea in my head of, hey, that God thing might be bullshit, right? Yeah. Like, I had never thought about that before. Like, I was still doing sacraments, but I was, like, doing confession and all that stuff. Yeah. And, like, you're at the age when you can kind of opt out of most of that stuff.
Yeah.
Or opt in if that's your thing. I don't care. But that was the age when I started to kind of drop it. And Xenogears, I think, a game that has very interesting things to say about God, like, planted those seeds.
The game itself is at odds with itself, I think, a lot. Because it's got a lot to say about, okay, we're... hey guys, let's go kill God.
Yeah.
But also, here's all this religious iconography, symbolism throughout the game. So it's sort of there's a weird parallel there.
Where it's like a lot of Xenogears, you can tell they had an idea and some motivation to do it, but weren't so well on the execution end. Like from reading about Xenogears, this is framed as like a lot of new people to Squaresoft, like kind of a rookie project, which is a lot to accomplish with a game like this in a 2-year development time in the PS1 era. So,
and isn't that the true story? Because the sort of I don't know what you call it, a rumor, the fable was that this game's budget was pulled to finish Final Fantasy VIII, but the reality was that they had a 2-year turnaround time, and this was not a development team that had a lot of experience, and they just had to.
Or a lot of pull.
Yeah, exactly. Or a lot of pull, and they just had to. They had to get it out the door.
Yeah, I believe it. Like Disc 2 is very different, and it wasn't they ran out of money. It's like, well, we can either end at Disc 1 or tell Disc 2 this way with these 2 unfinished dungeons and deliver the rest of the story as Disc 2 does. Speaking, this is like a housekeeping note. I don't think we're going to spoil this game before certain scenes happen. We're going to go with it as we play it and like allude to foreshadowing, or are we going to drop in and out of like the shit?
I agree with that.
Okay.
Like we may be making winks and nudges for those that have played the game before, but if you're slightly as insane as we are and are going to play this game for the first time, then we won't. We will avoid the outright spoilers. You mentioned a second ago about your relationship with this game while also consuming Dogma, the movie Dogma.
Kevin Smith.
Not just some Dogma. And this, another thing I think is important to point out about the way I consumed this game was that this being at the height of, not the height, but at the beginning of the golden age of PS1 Squaresoft games.
It's in a stride period.
Yeah. Final Fantasy VII created a lot of really great effective moments, like the Aerith death scene and the way that game used music and just how cool it made everything look.
Yeah, weird as it seems now, it was awesome back then.
At that time, it just seemed so cool. And also, I was consuming Evangelion at the time, and the layers of lore and story that get intertwined was a big sort of formative thing for me, because
inside this game, or the totality of all of this.
So the totality of all of this game. This is why this game really hit home for me, is because there's so many different layers of. At the time, I perceived there to be a lot of layers, a lot of things going on, a lot of mysteries to unfold, a lot of debts to be paid in terms of these mysteries as they're laid out, and those became the driving force for playing this game.
Yeah,
maybe not always playing the game. I mean, this game has some really interesting battle systems, but those mysteries and those revelations that that I was seeking in all kinds of media at the time, I think were really big right here.
Yeah, JRPGs thrive for me because I hadn't seen video games tell a 60-hour, 70-hour story, as weirdly disjointed as it was before. Like, that was an all-new thing to me. And Xenogears today still is the only game, and this could be from ignorance, the only game I know of that had a fucking lore Bible come out after the game to explain like all of the stuff they drew and referenced from in Xenogears Perfect Works, which was never actually localized, but people on the internet have localized it since then. I may have read the entire thing today.
Were you being serious about that?
Yeah, I read the whole thing at work today.
Okay.
It's a lot of diagrams filling up empty space, but it took me about 2 hours to get through all the text.
Wow. I thought you were just saying that earlier.
Nope, I did that. I read it all. You want to talk about the Zeboim era?
I apologize for not taking you seriously.
Yeah, no, I did that today.
Wow, okay.
There's a lot to that I think, like a lot of any good fiction, any good game, any good piece of media is going to have a lore Bible that you draw from, so you're not bullshitting yourself and making it up as you go along, like the TV show Lost or something.
Yeah.
Like, you want to know what you're doing beforehand, and they did. Somebody wrote all of this shit that is currently bundled on your floor in a rubber band. So it's, again, like they went all in, and the results in the personal interpretation may vary, but this game like tried to back up the myriad of themes coexisting inside of it. Which, again, like Final Fantasy VII, Panzer Dragoon Saga, they were entertaining and they were deep, but this game had like a lot on its mind. And to me, like, if I tried to explain it, I would say this is the best story ever told when I was 15. Now I've enjoyed other fiction where I don't think that anymore.
Yeah.
But just the breadth that this game went through was mind-blowing back then for a 15-year-old. I mean, you want to run out and shake people and say, you got to play this thing.
Yeah.
This does awesome shit. I haven't seen Eva yet.
Apparently, we've got to play this thing again in our 30s. So we're going to do it.
So GamePro gave this game like a 2.5 out of 5, which in the GamePro score was like sad face across the thing.
It was okay, gotcha.
And the review was done by Bubba Fat. For some reason, I don't know what GamePro paid in those days, but I was a member of the AOL antagonist message boards, which was like AOL's Game Hub.
Yeah.
And he was a moderator there. And I gave that guy so much shit about his, like, I was an idiot on the internet being acidic and acerbic trying to attack this guy for rating a video game poorly in 1998.
You were a preview of today's internet.
Yeah, no, totally. I was a petulant, stupid who didn't understand his opinions. But to be fair, his review is dog shit, and he didn't play it, if you can tell from the review.
Okay,
yeah. So look up that review on your own time of GamePro.
You don't have any excerpts today?
Yeah, no, I've got some excerpts.
Oh, yeah.
I have it ready on my phone right now. I'm glad you mentioned that.
I don't want to make this a podcast about trashing people's reviews from 20 years ago, but
in the case of Bubba Fat, I think he deserves it. Here's his closing paragraph. Topic heading, slow grinding gear. A relentlessly slow plot, plotting dialogue, and the unfortunate fumble of the robot interface's potential keeps Xenogears out of that stratosphere enjoyed by its far superior cousin, Final Fantasy VII. This is by no means a complete failure, but Gears hardly lives up to Squaresoft's two-word reputation. He also called the music annoying and Irish-inspired.
Irish-inspired?
The game-based character, this is a direct quote, the game-based characters thankfully aren't super deformed, but they are built of awkward sprites in an otherwise polygonal, rotatable environment, making the personages look goofy. Xenogears' sound is as dubious as its graphics, with decent, but almost cliched special effects and annoying Irish-inspired music. All of his pro tips are from the first 20 minutes of the game.
Oh, okay. Pro tip.
I think he mailed this one in, Bubba Fat. You're probably in your 50s now, but I hope you're still sorry for this shit.
Are we going to talk about the battle system and how that evolves, I guess, as we play the game?
Yeah, and how about how I failed to understand death blow combos?
Oh.
The first time I played it.
That was my favorite part about the game.
No, it was good. Yeah, but I was definitely stuck on that Ramses fight for a very long time.
I understood it, I think, and I'm still stuck.
I did. Oh, really? Yeah, that's like the first... This game's hard, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, you can definitely pull the numbers in your favor and cheese it, but the game wasn't light. And it was very... There's a lot of battles, like, it's still 20 years later, Calamity, Opium Orph, the Ramses fight, Shocken, one of the Groff fights. Like, this game has, like, a murderer's row of... Most of the gear fights are tough. which I guess we don't have context for what that means yet. But the game basically has 2 different battle systems, and it's a long story we'll get into. So yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much all for our episode 0, where we try to introduce some kind of reasoning for why in the hell we're doing this, and some authority on competing with our past selves and blending memory together to produce this omnibus of content. We hope to do 1 episode per week focusing on 1 chapter of the game. Maybe that'll change by the time this is released, but for now, that's how we're going to do it. You can find us on Twitter at Retro Amnesia Pod. You can find our email address at I don't remember, and we may or may not have a Patreon set up at this point in time.
Thanks.
So thank you for listening. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for coming to my basement.
Yeah, no, I liked it. Thank you for... air conditioning me.
I hope you like my carpet.
What's the goddamn sign off?
I don't know what it is.
Yes, we will kill God.
Yes, yeah, we will. Probably. I mean, or Yahweh.
I didn't play it with someone simultaneously where I could go and talk about the shit that happened. Fuck. I found a flyer at work for a religious service with a guest speaker who said she was cured by cancer by God. So I Googled her, and she's a Holocaust denier.
Oh! So let's talk about what this podcast is going to be. Oh, okay. I was throwing it to you. Sorry. Okay. Let's just cut that. Okay. Yeah. Let's just talk about. Sorry, I thought you had something in mind to say, and you didn't.
I probably should have.
It's not your fault.